There we are, and we're live. It is 7:10, a little bit late. Had to have dinner with my family. Very important. Spend some time, get to know them, see how they're doing. Today we're talking about intercooling, and more specifically, twintercooling. And if you take a look at the thumbnail, actually, what's unique about that thumbnail is that there are actually more than two forms of charge cooling. There are actually three when you count it. And we'll go over them. First of all, this is I got a little bit of information on the engine. It's a 408 stroker, Eagle stroker kit for a 408 stroker small block Ford. It has a dish piston in it, probably to get the compression at a reasonable ratio on the 408. Trick flow 170 as cast heads. I'm still waiting to hear what camshaft and intake manifold. Oh, here we go. Comp cams 230, 235 at 50. 530 lift, beehive springs, Chevy small block rockers, 1:6 ratio. Interesting on a Ford. 90,000 shorter than the 351 rocker. Okay, motorsport intake manifold. So I'm going to zoom in here a little bit and see if I can't see. If I can kind of tell on what. I'm guessing that that's a single plane Victor Jr. style is what it looks like, because I know that Edelbrock did those for Ford racing, so I'm almost certain that that's what that is. So we'll be able to keep that. I'm going to make that so I can see it all the time. Display. Turn off my auto lock. Kind of cool though. There we go. Now I can kind of check that out so I can get the full picture. So what we have is a small block Ford stroker Windsor, already good because it's big. You know, bigger is better, so you can always make more power with starting off with a bigger motor. When you start off with more power, you end up with more power at any given boost level, which is always good. A lot of times we just turn the boost up rather than making the bigger motor, but if you have the option to have everything, that's also awesome. The nice thing is on the bigger motor, you can put more or you can put more camshaft in it and still have it be like fairly reasonable and fairly mild. So we're going to get our pull up early and often. Okay, should I test twintercooling running, which means running boost through two different intercoolers, cooling off with two of them? So that's something I should put on my test regimen. Should I run that? I've run that actually out at Bonneville, but I've not done it. I don't think I've done it on the engine dyno. I don't think we've done two of them, so we'll see how people think about that. But on this particular photo, if you take a look at it, you can see there are actually three forms of charge cooling. One, we have the turbo going right into an air-to-water intercooler, fairly sizable one too. I've used that core before, and it's at least 1,000 horsepower. We've made a good bit more than that, but I thought that's what they were calling that, the 1,000 horsepower core. We use two of those when we do the Big Bang, so we have a setup that has two of those cores. So it has two in and then a big single out going, and then we obviously run ice water through that on the Big Bang motor. But one of them for 4-digit power level, not a problem at all. So you have that coming right out of the turbo, and then feeding an air-to-air intercooler, and then into in this case, it's going into a carburetor, and then the carburetor, as we know, will also cool the charger. So I'll tell you right off the bat. I'll tell you what I would do differently. This is not criticism of anybody's piece. This is one of the viewers, which I think is awesome. The guys that send me this stuff out, because that looks awesome and it looks like it's going to package very well. So running that the way that it is, always good. For me, I would run the air from the turbo through the air-to-air intercooler first, and take out a big chunk, and then I would run it through the air-to-water, because then I would use that for even more cooling, and then I would run all that cool air. Because it would be possible, obviously, with ice water, you could get, or even ambient, or even water that has a lower temperature than the ambient air, you're going to get more cooling from that. If the air to water is running ambient or near ambient water, you're not going to get a lot more cooling from having two of them if they're both running ambient, an ambient cooling transfer medium. You're just not going to get a whole bunch, because what's going to happen is, let's say you're running 250 degrees and you cool it down to 105 or something like that with an intercooler, and then it's a 80-degree day or whatever. The next intercooler is only going to take 5 or 10 or 20 degrees out of it, maybe. Not very much. You're going to get a big chunk out of it from the primary intercooler. You're going to get 100, 150, 100 to 150, even 200 degrees out of it coming out of the primary one, depending on what the difference in temperature is. And then the second one, because you're cooling air that's already fairly cool and you're using ambient air to cool it, you can never get it down to ambient. It'd be very, very difficult to do that. But you'll get it down closer, but the percentage gain, you're just not going to get a big movement there. The thing to do, obviously, would be to run a good air-to-air intercooler, do the first bit of heavy lifting on cooling the air, put an ice water air-to-water intercooler then as your secondary deal, and then have it, and ideally, have it go through a carburetor that's also an E85 carburetor or a methanol carburetor, and then blow through that, and then you could, essentially super chill it, because you'd have very cold air. You could have 50-degree air going into the carburetor, and then that would work very well. But I want to test this. So one of the things I want to do is we want to run that chili bomb, that little cheap air-to-water intercooler, and maybe 2 of those. That would work good. But we want to run that to see how well it works. I'm curious. I'm kind of curious more about the flow rate of the water in that than I am about what it's going to do. It's obviously limited in its size and capacity, its flow rate. All those things are going to dictate that, hey, might be a 500 horsepower one or a 600 horsepower one or whatever it is. And then also its ability to cycle and continually do this. Its recovery rate is, I think, going to be limited based on the size of the cooling orifice, of the flow orifices for the water. They weren't very big going in and out of there. The tube itself is okay. That I think we could get something good coming from there, but I just don't know how much water flow we can get through there. We'll just have to see. But that will be interesting. But very, very, very cool of the shot for you to send me the shot of that, and then get the extra cooling through the carburetor, because whenever we blow through the carburetor, we obviously get charge cooling just from that, irrespective of the other stuff. So I also got another interesting email today, or text message, or some sort of communique about, and it's more about, and this might be another test that we should probably do, and that's running water methanol or straight methanol. I've run lots of testing on it, on what it does to charge temperature, which we know it reduces charge temperature. It definitely reduces detonation too. If once you get it into the combustion chamber, that definitely helps ward off detonation, both with water and or with the alcohol portion of it, because we have more octane with the alcohol. Water itself is going to suppress detonation, and then you have the cooling effect of the alcohol as well. So all of those are good things. So there's no denying the potential of water meth injection. I've used it a lot. My personal problem with it, or I don't even have a personal problem with it. My thing is that whenever I'm testing something, I like to tell the whole story about things. If I talk about an intake manifold that made 20 horsepower more than the stock intake manifold, that tells only part of the story, because it did that like at 7,000 RPM, but down low, it also traded 30 foot-pounds of torque. I have to tell both of those things when I'm doing this test. So I have to discuss all of that. A lot of people out there have their favorite thing. They're like, oh, this is what I do. So I'm only going to say good things about it. That could be politics, that could be religion, that could be anything. That could be your favorite math equation. Whatever it is, people are prone to doing that. So they want to just tell you, oh, this is the greatest thing. This does this and this does this. I'm like, yeah, I understand that. And I understand the science behind it. But here's my thing. It does that, but it also does this. So we have to talk about all of that. And then the issue that I have, and the things that I pointed out in the testing, or things that I found out during the testing, is that water meth injection is not precise in its distribution. And so I got another request today for doing a test pre-turbo, which I want to do because I've never tried it. So I actually want to see what's going to happen there. So I have a snow kit, and I've run it many times on lots of stuff. And we've already demonstrated that especially with the boost juice, it did very well and cooled the charge temperature and did all that. And that worked good. It did the things that it was supposed to do. It suppressed detonation, and it doesn't really make power per se. But if it allows you to run more timing and stuff, and in diesel applications, because you're adding fuel, it will add power. On applications where it's running on the limit of the NOx sensor and it has retarded timing, and you run water methanol injection, it will pick up power. Like on Coyotes, I've seen that happen. The LT versions where we have high compression direct injection, it tends to be helpful there. But again, the problem is that if you're blowing this through with even a high pressure nozzle where you're trying to atomize this stuff, you're blowing it into the long runner intake manifold before the throttle body, or even in the intake manifold if you want to do it in there. The problem is there's no way to have it get in evenly to all the cylinders. I don't know how you do that. The only way I know how to do that is if you did port injection. If you did individual nozzles for the water meth injection going into the cylinder head, the problem with that is that you're going to have less cooling. And so there's always some kind of trade-off. And now the answer, at least according to people that have sent me this information, not this one particular person, I just mean everybody that talks about this, is that we run it on turbo applications and you run it pre-turbo. So you miss the water methanol injection before the turbo chops it all the stuff, super atomizes it, and then that blows it in and makes it all go in somehow evenly. It finds all the cylinders in your typical kind of EFI, long runner intake manifold. Even on a short runner manifold, how does it find its way evenly into all those cylinders? I know how port injection does that because we determine how much fuel goes into each one. Whether or not then you are fighting just the intake design itself. Does it distribute air evenly to all of those cylinders? And if it does do that, and it did that NA, does it now do that under boost with a manifold that, it's not a turbo manifold? Did that somehow change the dynamics of the intake manifold by pressurizing air and forcing it in there? Did that now change the distribution of the airflow? Even if we had equal fuel distribution and we don't have equal airflow distribution, then we don't have equal distribution. There's still going to be a problem. So my question is, and I don't know the answer to this, right now, as a theory, I don't see how we can. I mean, the two negative things that I can see right off the bat with running the water meth injection pre-turbo is that it's not good for the turbo. It's not good for the impeller. It could definitely damage the impeller, if not immediately, certainly over time. So that's a potential. The other thing is we do get increased efficiency with the turbo. I could see how we could get power gains potentially from doing that. I would be interesting to see what it did to the boost. If there was a change in that, what it did to response rate, that would be interesting. All of that, I'm all for. I'm not, I'm not negative pre-turbo injection. I'm very positive because I want to test it. I want to see what happens. I just want to run it myself. But the question is, even if we chop this stuff up with the spinny blade of death in there, and let's say that we are able to atomize the water and the methanol, water is going to be a difficult task. But if we're able to atomize that even better, having it go through the slicer, dicer, impeller blade, and then it still has an even longer route from the turbo into the intake manifold, unless it just has a very short section and no intercooler. Then I can say, okay, well, at least now we've done some mixing, hopefully, and then it's probably not going to come out of suspension in a short run. But what happens if we have a long run? What if we're trying to blow that through an air-to-air intercooler or an air-to-water intercooler? I don't see how that fuel doesn't come out of suspension hitting the intercooler core. I don't know how that's not possible. I don't know how, if somebody looked in there and saw that that there wouldn't be water meth leavings on the hot side of the intercooler. I don't know how that's not possible. And then as it goes through the intercooler and it cools off, How does the droplet size not change? How do we not change the distribution going through there? And then it's got to exit there and then go from the intercooler into the intake manifold and then find its way evenly into all the cylinders. I don't know how pre-turbo injection is going to change any of that distribution. I know that the theory that people are telling me is that, well, it super atomizes it, and so it's acting just like air. It can't do that. Even if they're very, very fine particles, it's going to be very, very difficult for all that to find its way. Like I said, if air can't find its way evenly into all the cylinders, the water and the fuel are not going to make that better. They're only going to make it worse. And so I just don't know how that can happen. That being said, I want to test it. I want to see, because here's the other thing that happens is, and I've gotten this a lot over the years, that, well, we run it on mine all the time and it works great. Yes and no. More than likely, you could have run it without that. And again, it running and working on your application doesn't tell me about distribution. It just tells me that there's enough in there that it's, and that and the combination of your tuning means that it's not detonating or detonating much in one cylinder, at least enough yet to damage it. That's all that it says. It may say that they're all very, very rich and that they're, if you don't have individual cylinder O2s or EGTs or something that's tells us what's happening individually in all the cylinders, we don't really know. And so we would just be speculating. So the only way to know for sure would be 802s and maybe EGTs in there to kind of see what's going on, to run it without them, to run it with them, and to run it in a safe enough tune where that you could do that and then introduce the water meth, not as a as a motor saving thing, but just as a test thing to see what's happening. Okay, we have it tuned right. It's the air fuel distribution or at least the air fuel ratio is even. And this may even require even before the water meth injection, which before we allow it to cure or cause problems, we would have to cure all the problems before that. So we have an intake manifold. We have to maybe do sequential injection and then maybe individual cylinder trimming to get everything right in all the cylinders and go, okay, right now, if we run it, the air fuel is right in all the cylinders. They're all 11.8 to 1, not just as an aggregate when we tested in the collector or after the turbo. They're all 11.8, so that's working good. Now what happens when we hit the water meth injection? And what happens when we hit it and run it after the turbo? And what happens if we hit it with the same nozzle and stuff? And then what happens if we hit it before the turbo? Have we improved the situation? And I know that I feel comfortable, at least, that we'll improve the situation in terms of power and maybe even charge temperature. Although I think we would get to an optimum point of the amount of time required to have this stuff in contact with the charge air to do the cooling. I think if you leave it in there for an hour and a half, it's not going to cool it any more than it did over some other shorter period of time. So I'm pretty sure that that's going to happen. And I'm pretty sure that pre-turbo is going to be better than post-turbo in terms of power production. I just don't know what's going to do to distribution. And that's kind of the thing that I would like to see for me personally. So let's see what people are saying here. Should I test Twintercooling running boost through 2 intercoolers? 89% saying yes. So some people just don't want to see that run. So really, you're here and you've taken the poll and you don't want to see that run. That's just not right. Okay, let's see what you guys got going on here. It is Monday. 1 Liter Mafia is in the house. Mike Davis, Uncle Squirrel, Dean's in the house. Robert Moore. We've got lots of good people here. Everybody here is good people, though. Until I have to kick you out. Would be great if you could do some all-motor, high-compression, 600 horsepower, 5.7 stuff for a change. There are all-motor 5.7 stuff up there. We didn't quite get to 600. But it would take, I think we did it with no, we didn't do it with a stock bottom end. I did it with a stock bottom end to begin with, and then we put pistons in it, I think, which allowed us to put enough camshaft in it and a high ram. And I think it was mid to high 500, so 550, 570, somewhere around there. I'm too tired to stay awake. Sorry, it's 3 a.m. Okay. All right, Madman, you get some sleep. You're in the UK. Did you watch the World Cup? How did you know I was here? I haven't said a word yet. Larry, come on, you're always creeping back there. Happy harmonica, nice. I imagine as long as you can need more cooling and caffeine exchanger and cold air, the more the better. The application would decide it's not going to be in danger of heat soak. So you want to pull at 100%, Dean? Dude, let's win. Yep, we do got to try the chili bomb. We don't do Christmas until January 7th, so no Hanukkah, just Russian Orthodox Christmas for the Squirrels family. Triple cooling and interchiller. Well, this one already has triple, so that would be quadruple. So I got to hit live chat, right? Is that what we're talking about? It's live. It's all the way live. Down to 88%. My disappointment knows no bounds. Compressed air supercharging works very, very well. Then you don't need any of this stuff. Let's see. Wow, it wouldn't even let me scroll all the way back. Recals here. Dean, how many fins per inch? I don't know. That's probably from a previous one. Lexi, alcohol versus gas, intercooler on a drag racing application. What do Finnish people have to do with it? Please test as I'm doing similar, so it would be very interesting. Why not try spraying windshield washer fluid on the air-to-air cooler? You do have a big fan blowing on the air-to-air, right? Yep. I did try spraying nitrous through the air-to-air, and that had a little bit of an effect, not a lot. Spraying water on there definitely works. We've had misters on them before. Yep, worked on the radiator really good too. Please test 2 intercoolers at the same time, but one before and the second one after boost. So you want to intercool the air going into the turbo? That's not a good idea. That's not efficient use of intercooling. Late to the party, we're talking about air-to-air as well as an air-to-water. Yeah, that's the video, or the thumbnail that we have up has that. It has both an air-to-air and an air-to-water and blowing through a carburetor, which is further cooling the air. Mr. Brule won't let us have water meth injection in the dyno? Yeah, sure he will. He's great. Try ice and acetone. The acetone's flammable. That's not a good idea. I'm running a 7.3 intercooler with a modified end tank on my 6-liter. 3024 by 3 seems like a lot, but the air never heats up more than 30 degrees. What a big for towing. The big 4-wheel drive diesel stuff, those are definitely rolling heat exchangers. So this is kind of cool. So this if you guys can't see, let's see if I can get that to. Zoom it in very well. There you go. Now you can kind of see it. See that? Carburetor, turbo, air to water right after the turbo, then air to air. That's what the thumbnail is, and then hopefully this will come back. So now we can get rid of that. And boom, and we're out. So that's what it looks like. So very, very cool. Lots of you can never be too cool. What if the old cool cans guys used with ice or dry ice and water use? Yeah, they were worth gains. The guys at West Tech tested that with Freiberger. They tested out a carbureted application and was worth power. I want to talk about Richard's polls. Nice. What would happen with pure oxygen? Do you want to do pure oxygen injection instead of water method? It's very volatile and it's very volatile and will explode. It's been tried a lot before. That's why everybody eventually went with nitrous oxide. It's a much more stable compound and it releases the oxygen molecules. Pure oxygen just tends to catch on fire. Lowercase dz. Yeah, dry ice and water is not a good idea. Acetone freezes way colder than water. That's what Dan was saying. The water and the dry ice just outgasses basically. And yes, it is flammable. Compressor supercharging, very, very cool. Just died of the motor in Minneapolis. Tomorrow morning it's going to be -3. That's going to be a really good intercooler then. That's going to have all of the oxygen molecules going into the turbo. That'll be nice. That would, if you need to have a cold air induction going into the turbo from outside, that would be super cool. You feel the compressor on the turbo, that'd be super chill. Yeah, valve, the scuba tank stuff didn't work. The flow valve that they have for the compressor supercharger is about this big. It's ginormica. You should really check out the tuners doing water method injection for a living. It's been proven, Richard. There's data to back it up. The fact that people have used it and used it effectively doesn't tell me anything about distribution. I want to know about distribution. I want to know how you can get a liquid to evenly flow into an intake manifold that was designed only to flow air and doesn't do that very well. So it's not a matter of me questioning other people about or about who knows more or any of that. This is not that kind of thing. That's not what I do. My question is how did people overcome that? And what usually happens is they didn't overcome that. They're just running it anyway. And hoping that it works well enough. Pre-turbo injection is no issue either with an intercooler inline. So how does it not come out of the suspension when it hits the intercooler fins? It would be awesome if you actually tried compressor supercharging. It's already been done at West Tech. The compressor supercharging company already ran tests there. They did. Jeff Smith did he didn't do a video on it, but he did a magazine story on it, I think for Hot Rod. And they've run that car a lot. They've run it at the track. They've run it, and I think they tested it at West Tech twice. And the thing's amazing. It's amazing how much timing you can run. How much they didn't care about, how much timing it had full NA timing in it, and how it was doubling the power output at 7 pounds of boost. It was 7 or 8 pounds. Working on a 302 experiment with my uncle left me unbuilt when he passed. Burt Monroe wasn't an Indian. No, it was not. Yep, Racer D, that's right. That's what makes power. Hot oil and cold water. Yeah, Dan, it would definitely be easier to the stuff is really nice and clean. In fact, I should probably make a point of running water meth injection on all of my junkyard motors with a turbo on it when we do that, just to clean out the inside of the motor. Is stack injection setup the only way to have an equalized delivery to every cylinder? No, I don't think so. I think it can be done with a plenum manifold also. And I think if anything becomes more problematic under boost, but the runners would, for them to provide even flow and even power production over the whole range, they would have to be the same length and size and taper and all of that. Going on your, see, you think that this is a pro, water meth, anti-water meth thing, and it's not. That's where you're coming from. So you're a pro water meth guy, and you're approaching me as though I'm an anti-water meth guy, and that's not at all. Like I said at the beginning of this, that's not it at all. I'm just pointing out all of the good things and the bad things. All of the things need to be discussed, all of them. And I don't understand how any sort of injection thing that you're putting in there, nobody I know injects nitrous after the turbo and before the intercooler. There would be no reason to do that. If you want to inject nitrous on a turbo application, you should inject it right at the intake manifold. Normally on this side of the throttle body, we like to do it just that way. If the nitrous sticks open like the solenoid, we can close the throttle and then stop the stuff from going in the motor and have the motor not overrun. So you would have that immediately near the throttle body right before the intake manifold. But nitrous does have the same problem, and I discussed exactly that when we were doing nitrous distribution in the video that I did about nitrous distribution, and we talked about that. You can get away with stuff even though the distribution isn't ideal, because it's not. If you try to run fuel and nitrous, like through a single fogger where you're injecting nitrous and fuel, through a single fogger in front of the throttle body and going into a long runner LS intake manifold, it isn't distributed evenly. More than likely, the nitrous is distributed much more evenly because it's a gas and not a liquid. But the fuel part of it is not being distributed evenly. The problem is the intake manifold by itself already, even with port injection, doesn't have equal airfield distribution. So it's starting off wrong, and it's also wrong when we add nitrous and fuel to it. But it can still work and not hurt itself. Just like we see with every dual plane intake manifold or single plane intake manifold, when we run a carburetor on there, the difference between the airfield distribution in the manifold is dramatic. It could be 1.5 points or 2 points, and yet it still runs and works. But the point is still valid. There's still bad distribution there on that application. There's bad distribution on nitrous and fuel unless you just inject the fuel at the nitrous with the injectors and run nitrous as a gas through it. That's much better. In fact, guys that are making a lot more power with an EFI setup tend to do that. They run just the nitrous through the manifold, which seems to find its way better through an EFI intake manifold, and then make sure that they have the amount of fuel that they need just going through the injectors. So that works. and as much as I want water methanol to work and be great, it still has distribution issues. And there's no way I don't know of any way to get around that, like I said, other than doing port injection for all of the water methanol. Picked up a 98W6 TA LS1 with a spun bearing. Has a milled 243 heads, a good cam and spring. Trying to decide what route to go on the new engine. 600 wheel horsepower and 91. That's definitely going to be like boost territory, and you can get that either with a 5.3 or a 6.0. That either one of those will do that. So Newman, you're hooking your turbo setup up so that you can like bypass it and not run the turbo. Some kind of wonderful. Let's see. Scuba tanks work on sharks. Jim, I've seen people do cooling the beers with fire extinguishers. The guys from Mythbusters did that, and that was the thing that they used that cooled the beer off quicker than anything else. Have you tested the Chevrolet V6? Yeah, 4.3 liters, 3,800s, a few of those. let's see. Man, I'm going back here a long ways. I haven't done a big bang on a V6 yet. I'm trying to get back to where I was, and I'm apparently I'm lost. Let's see. Let's see. So you have a question, why not a small big block of 396? I'm building one of those right now. I'm building an L78, the 375 horse 396. The reason that most people don't build 396 is, one, they're hard to find. We find lots of 454s in the wrecking yard, but very few, if any, 396s. So from just it's easy to find standpoint, if you're going to put together a motor, a 454 is an easier way to go. And if a guy's going to rebuild something, like if you're going to take a 454 and you're going to put 4 draws and 4 pistons in it, you should just build a 496. Because a 496 is going to do everything that a 454 does or a 396 does. It's just going to do more of it. So if you're going to spend the money on putting the new things in, just go big. Some kind of wonderful. Let's see. What's the difference between twin intercoolers and one big one? Maybe nothing. There would be a difference, especially if the 2 intercoolers that you used were different. So if you ran one air to water, like we were talking about, one air to air, and then one air to water with ice, you might be able to get everything with just one big enough air to water with ice. But you couldn't say you were twintercooled. That would be like saying, what's the difference between a single turbo of one size and then twin turbos of 2 half that size? So they would do the same thing, but you don't get to say that you have a twin turbo combination. I have a question about batch fire fuel injection. If all injectors are injecting fuel into a given bank, how is it not overfueling? It seems like 8 cylinders you'd be wasting. So you are wasting a lot of fuel with batch fire. More so than if you have sequential injection. If you're going to get nuts, let's run the AC evap. Yeah, we've gone over that sort of stuff. CO2 fire extinguishers, that would be good. But CO2 is a much better choice than using nitrous. It's less expensive. So D turned on your AC. Nice. At least it will be nice and cool. Richard, have you tested the Truck Norris cam with all stock LS heads to see if the cam head combo makes a difference in the power? If so, which LS heads will make the most power with that camshaft? You're thinking about that incorrectly. So the way you should be thinking about it is the head, not which head likes that cam the most. The way you need to think about it is, what is your combination and what stock cam did you have in that? And then you put the Truck Norris cam in. So in any stock combination, whatever the combination was before you put the cam in, the Truck Norris cam is going to make the most power with the most powerful combination that you put it in. So that would be short of an LS7. That would be an LS3. So the LS3, it's not that the rec port heads like that camshaft. It's just that it makes more power. And so when you go from the LS3 cam to the Truck Norris cam is going to make more power in that combination than it would on a 4.8 or a 5.3 or a 6.0. Isn't the primary intercooling function to reduce knock and detonation? Yes, and to add power, because that way we can add the timing and the boost that we want for that. And an intercooler, when you run an intercooler, you can theoretically have equal airflow distribution, equal cooling distribution. When are you going to turbo a 4.3 liter V6? That video is already up. And also, we also did one with a supercharger. Jory, minus 30-degree winters here. That's the so turbo and supercharged stuff run really good when it's that cold outside. Traction is usually a problem, though. Richard, I was impressed with the test results on the fast intake, and what impressed me was that the fast didn't lose horsepower and torque down low before the big gain in power. It did very well on the L33. Bruce, why not take a nitrous plate under a carburetor and run your water methanol mixture through both lines? Mixture would be atomized better. I don't know why it would be atomized better there. If anything, it would be atomized better going through the turbo. There wouldn't be a lot of atomization because if you ran water methanol just through the lines, it's just going to squirt in there. You have to have lots of pressure, and they've got to go through a nozzle to do that. Anyone remove an F150 intercooler and dump the water out? I want to see a Van Dyne super turbo on the dyno. I guess what I need to do is, obviously I've wanted to do this for a long time. I'll need to do a water meth injection pre-turbo, and I want to do it with an intercooler, because then I want to dump the intercooler out and see if there's water that builds up on the leading side of the intercooler after the turbo. I don't know how part of that's not going to come out of suspension hitting what is essentially a flat core. But we'll see. Maybe it all finds its way in there, and I don't understand it. Water meth needs to be done as port injection. The problem with that is I think you get rid of a bunch of the cooling that takes place if you do it that way. The only thing that's going to happen is more pressure drop and more mass to absorb more heat. Super chilled with liquid nitrogen. I did want to do liquid nitrogen. I wanted to have an air-to-air intercooler, and I wanted to dip that in a vat, essentially a shallow vat of just enough to cover the air-to-water intercooler, so that we could run the boost through something that's super chilled. I don't know how safe that would be for the intercooler core, and it's going to outgas and not be good. Obviously, in the dyno, it'll be fine. But I don't know if that's doable. I would imagine that when you inject water into a turbo with 200+ degree discharge temperature, the water doesn't stay liquid for long. The vapor isn't going to fall out of suspension like a liquid. What about an air-to-air and water-to-air? That's what the thumbnail is. I just showed that earlier. This one has both, and a blow-through carburetor. I haven't played around with Audi stuff. Are you going to run the intercoolers in series or parallel? The way that they're configured there is in series. In parallel, it improves the flow rate, but in series improves the cooling. So again, you have to decide which one of those things works better. Let's see. Every time I click forward, it sends me way up. Might be a silly thought, but I was wondering about a retrofitted plenum to a stack and tuned injection setup so that each cylinder will have its own throttle body. Just trying to think outside the box. The throttle body part of it, or the blade inside, is almost irrelevant. It doesn't matter that you have a single opening going into a common plenum if all the runners are housed in the common plenum, which is normally what intake manifolds are. Where the air is entering, you can get around that for distribution, because a lot of people don't realize, they think that the air is, like even on an NA motor, that the air is rushing in here. It's being drawn in there because what's happening is all of the cylinders are grabbing air from the common plenum, and then the throttle body's filling the common plenum. Whereas on a pressurized deal, it's pressurizing air in there, it's rolling around and can cause problems. But almost every intake manifold is that. It just doesn't have a blade. And honestly, I would, on most of these, I would rather not have blades there right next to the port, unless you're trying to get throttle response or things like that. But that's not going to help with distribution. Top-fuel dragster guys struggle with equal boost to each cylinder and try to control it with different plates between the blower and the manifold. So they're running diverters, I think, in the lower manifold, right? Carl with the twin turbo Shadow did port alcohol injection with a great success. Ported TBS intake manifold worth it of buying a fast. I've never run a ported Trailblazer SS intake manifold. I don't know how well they do or how well they don't do. I've never run one of the Rod Mod LS3 intake manifolds either, and I'd like to try one of those, because I know that on the LS3 stuff, the factory LS3 manifold is really hard to beat. A fast isn't any better than that. And so, but on a cathedral port application, a fast is a lot better than the factory intake manifolds. But maybe a ported one gets closer. I don't know. What about spraying nitrous or CO2 across the intercooler? I have a video up on that where we use nitrous as the cooling agent on an air-to-air. Would you do a big bang on a 3.9 Magnum? That'd be really low on the list, unfortunately, right now. Got too many other ones that need to get done. Why not boost through a methanol carburetor with multi-port injection? That would fix the distribution issue. That would be nice. That's something that Eric kind of tried to do at Westech, not with a carburetor, but with a throttle body injection, like a 4-hole or an 8-hole throttle body injection, and then also port injection. So they were trying to figure out a percentage combination of those two things to get equal air fuel distribution in the runners, and then also get the charge cooling that you want as you're blowing through it. But I don't know. I don't think it was very successful. I don't know if they had enough time to get it working right. Richard, what is the best way to test small block for compression, power, leakage, cracks using the budget backyard setup? You have to. A compression tester is really the way to go. I've seen guys do it. I've seen guys do it with their thumb. And I saw a guy have a test rig that he runs the motor on without the pan on. And he just has oil going to it. And they spin it over. I think they're spinning it. It's almost like a backyard spintron. I think they're spinning it over with an electric motor. But you can do it with a starter. But a cranking compression will tell you whether everything is even or not. We're going to build a port injection system for a 455 Pontiac. I used to wish I could sing. Now I wish you could. I'll be here all weekend. Tip your waitresses. They need the money for makeup. Do I believe in underdrive pulleys? Is it a spiritual thing? They do make power, and I've tested them many times on 5-liter Mustangs, on Hondas, probably on something else too. I'm trying to think what else. But again, like we talked about before with water methanol injection, you got to look at both things. It's not all good. There's also some bad, like with when we put the underdrive pulleys on a Mustang. And then at idle, it doesn't want to charge it it doesn't want to spin the water pump fast enough. So when you're driving in traffic, the thing wants to overheat. And also it doesn't want to spin the alternator fast enough. So your battery gets drained. So there's a reason that the OEMs did the things that they did to make it like that. You can get more power. You'll see that, especially as you go up in RPM, the power tends to increase with these underdrive pulleys, but there are trade-offs. Crash, you have an idea, try to build nearly identical displacement, head flow cam, big block and small block to see how much difference there is just because the big block has more mass. So you want to do a rotating assembly test? Is that what you want to do? There's an easier way to do that rather than do a big block and a small block, because it'd be almost impossible to get head flow the same on a big block and a small block, at least at every lift range. Thanks for this twin air to air into an air to water. I guess if you want to use 3 of them. Thanks for the straight information. I can change it up and run it air to air, then ice water to air. Wish we could test both ways. It'd be interesting. I mean, anything that you do, my guess is that motor that you're running is, if you just run the air to water and you run ice water through it, and then you're blowing through a carburetor, you're going to get everything that the other intercooler might just be in the way. The air to air might just be in the way, and it might just be pressure drop. I've run the air to water on a blow through big block like you have set up there. In fact, probably that core too, and it worked really well. Rare Morrison used a 396 big block with a 348 crank to make a small cubic inch big block complete with Glidden's Cleveland's. Well, they would have similar heads, that's for sure. For the 468, for building a 396, I'm all in on that. I'm building one, so I'm part of the 396 camp. Which type of intercooler would work best with the LSA? You have an intercooler on the LSA, right? It's an air to water, and you just need to get lots of flow through it. Probably make the core bigger if you're running lots of power, because it's sized to have a given amount of heat transfer and then a given amount of flow, and it's designed to have that at or near the stock power levels, and then with room to grow a little bit. But after you start going up in power a lot, you run into flow rate of the blower and the flow rate of the intercooler also. Favorite serpentine belt set up to adapt to a Cadillac? I don't know about that. I've never tried anything like that. What's the status update on the giveaway Nova? Is it ever going to run again? Yeah, the last time I talked to Oliver, he was he got an L69 305, the HO 305, and has a transmission for it, and he was going to put it in. In fact, we were going to run it on the dyno. He was going to let me take it down to West Tech and run on the dyno first and do some testing with it, but he took it apart, and it's not what he thought it was. It's not in good enough shape, but he's fixed it now. I think he's put a cam in it and stuff, and so that's what's going in the Nova now. In fact, I have the exhaust for him. I even have a carburetor for him. I hope someday to see pre-Eagle 5.7 with, had me tested with a 392 intake. Will that 392 intake bolt on to the early heads? What's the secret to carbureted engines starting almost instantly while EFI engines crank a bit at first? I didn't really know that was a thing. I didn't think a carbureted engine started better than an EFI intake. I mean, an EFI motor. Had a battery charging issue with a stepped 472 Cadillac crank pulley. Adam, what power difference would you expect to see on an LS1 with a supercharger on methanol going from 9-to-1 to 11-to-1 compression? Well, typically compression is worth 3 to 4% per 1 full point. So, but it'd be 3 to 4% of the NA motor. So whatever your NA motor is, you can kind of calculate that. It's not the supercharged power output. That would be nice if we could multiply it like that. Everybody would be jacking their compression ratio up if that was the case. Are there easy ways to keep peak horsepower but push it lower in the RPM range instead of trying to raise it out further? Yeah, the easiest way to do that is with displacement. Make your 5.3 a 383, make your 6-liter a 408, that sort of thing. Make your 4.8 a 383. That will push peak power at a lower engine speed. You can also run longer runners, smaller camshafts. That tends to do it too. I bet the L69 305 would make as much or slightly more horsepower than a Goodwrench 350. I don't know if I've run a Goodwrench 350. We've ran the 190 horsepower small blocks that GM sold, but it makes 260 or 270 or something when you put the carburetor and headers and everything on. Ford, you got your Mach-E Mustang delivered to you? I got an L33, but I don't see any identification numbers on the corner. You should see cylinder head casting numbers on the heads. And then you should be able to see, I'll see if I can show you a picture of where it says 5.3 liter. It should say it on the front of the block. I think I have that photo. Okay, here we go. See that? It's in the ribs to the side of the water pump on the front of the block. It says 5.3 liter. It's not going to say L33, but it will be aluminum. $190 horses is a Goodwrench, 290 is the Deluxe. But yeah, we had the little tiny cam, the 180 degree at 50 camshaft. Any more videos coming on the 8.1? Yes, we will do some more stuff on those. How many degrees of timing should I pull away per pound of boost? I don't know, 1 or 1.5. Depends on what kind of fuel you have. I think that the 305 is going to make less torque than the 350 does, although the 350 is that Goodwrench motor is pretty low compression, if I remember right. It doesn't say, it should say 799 on the front of the head and not on the backside. So I've got a picture of that because I use that in my videos all the time. There's the block. Here's the church. Here's the steeple. It's on the front corner of the block, front corner of the head, below the valve cover. Still, I know I have it here. There's the block. That one's a 706, I think. Yep. There we go. Right by the coolant temp sensor. So, can you see that? So I'm not getting the reflection there. Come on. Can't get that to. How do I get that to come in? But that's where it is. That's the front. Let's see. Nope, does not want to do it. Does not want to cooperate. Right up from the coolant temp sensor. It's blank where the number should be. So we will turn off our 87% that I need to run intercoolers, Twintercools. I wonder if somebody machined those or if those are aftermarket heads on there. How much difference in power do you think ported 243 heads make with a stock 2-inch valve? A 2-inch valve doesn't restrict a 243 head very much. You can make a lot of power with a really good ported set, even keeping the stock valve size. Is E85 any good without a cooler, without an intercooler? Yeah, that's as a matter of fact, a lot of guys run E85 and don't run intercoolers when they run E85 because it's so good at cooling. Put either in snow performance water methanol injection. I've run that many times. I like their setup. The difficulty in running the turbo stuff, though, and trying to get 802s is that we have to configure headers with 802s to run the. This might be problematic. I'm going to have to get another set of headers to do that. Blue windshield washer fluid. I have a test up where we tested 2 different types of windshield washer fluid, and it was nowhere near what the boost juice was. But it does cool stuff. It made a lot less power though. 1 more minute. Bam, 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 bam. E85 is hard to start in cold weather. Just put a torch to it. So who's going to get the last question? Time to go. Time to go, go, go. Gotta go celebrate. Messy, messy, messy. Overbill, what's going on, man? I know there's no dancing girls. I feel like they don't love me anymore. You guys, I keep banning them. I did see something that I wanted. So if you guys are looking to give me a Christmas present, here's what I want. See, you know the thing for your phone? I found a little thing that plugs into there, and it's a little disco ball. So you plug it in and turn it on, and it does the disco lights. You gotta have that. I saw that. I saw one of those in a. I was gonna get it. I saw one of those in a store, but it was. It looked like it had been broken, and the package was like retaped back together. So I'm not. That's definitely not gonna work. And I couldn't find any more of those, but I wanted it badly. I have one that's a little that you plug in. It's a little fan. So when you're, I don't know, too hot to handle. But the disco ball, I love that idea. It's 1 minute 60 seconds in the U.S. No, it depends. What's your rocker ratio on your time? Richard, I've noticed you used a TFS 225 on a 3905 bore. Did I use a 225? We used a 215 on the Big Bang motors. But a 225 works fine because you know how we know that? Because a 799 head works on the stock 4.8 and 5.3. They use those heads on that motor from the factory. And as I said, we ran the 215 on the I think it was a 5.3. It doesn't have to be disco, just the disco light. A lava lamp. I got my son one of those a long time ago. But I also got him the little ball with all the electricity in it and stuff. So when you put your hand over it, it follows you. Very cool. On one of the borescopes you hook up to the phone. I have one of the cameras with the light that you can put in the intake manifold and stuff that attach to your phone. It works pretty good. Okay, Kyle, yours will be the last one for today. I'm putting a GT45R turbo on a stock 5.7 LS1 in a VZ going to gap piston rings. What do you recommend to gap them to? 28 thousandths. Stock ones came out, they were 20. And they were 16. I put them both at 28, both the top and the second ring. And then you should be good. And on that note, it's time to go. So I will be back in the morning-ish. I got a lot of stuff going on in the morning. So I try to get to the morning motivation, the powwow to get everybody going on their projects. I need to get going on my projects too, but you know, Christmas is here and I'm trying to get videos done. I'm trying to work on the spark plug video now with the E3 Diamond Fire technology because we all know how awesome that is. How, you know, we're expecting big power from that. So I'll be doing that video and hopefully that will go up tomorrow, but I will see you guys all in the morning.